All right, looks like we got people from all over Canada today. All right. I think we can actually get started here. So we'll jump into it right now. First of all, welcome everyone to the first episode in our series of Compliance in Practice. This series is designed to help business leaders tackle complex issues in the workplace with confidence. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to meet with us today. On the call with us today is myself, one of the solutions experts here at Citation Canada, and Kim, who I'll let introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Sean. As the lead HR consultant at Citation Canada, I support our clients with solutions spanning the employment lifecycle. So from compliance to strategies, policies, leadership coaching, we keep it plain language and practical, and we focus on outcomes, hopefully fewer risks, better decisions, and stronger performance.
Amazing. And we're really lucky to have you here today. Thank you very much, Kim. A quick introduction to Citation Canada. If you're joining us for the first time, we're a Canadian headquartered software and services company specializing in HR and health and safety management and compliance. And for over 15 years, we've been helping thousands of businesses across Canada keep their teams safe, engaged, and set up for success. Our goal is to make it easier for organizations to navigate the complexities of compliance while building great workplaces. Just so everyone knows, we're recording this session and we will be sending it out to everyone who is registered and is attending. And our chat is open. Encourage everyone as much as possible to be in the chat today and engage as much as you'd like, but we're not taking live questions. We actually have Alex and Yusuf running our chat today, so feel free to say hi to them as well. But I think what we'll do here is we'll start off by jumping into our first topic today. But considering we chose termination and absenteeism as our two topics, Kim, why did we choose these topics for our first episode of our series?
Well, we started here as these are the top areas that our members look to us for support with, and also where a small misstep can get expensive quick. They certainly can impact every workplace. They could create legal exposure and then have ripple effects throughout the business.
Honestly, that makes a ton of sense. We're going to actually start with terminations here. And before we jump in, we're going to put a quick poll up on the screen for you all to jump into. We'll give you a few moments here. We just want to know, what's the biggest risk you worry about when terminating an employee? We'll give you about 30 seconds here to take a look through there. All right, about 5 more seconds here. Beautiful. We got lots of different responses. Amazing. As you guys can see, across the board, there's lots of different reasons why you can have terminations and some of the challenges that can come from it. But I guess one of the biggest questions I want to start with for you, Kim, off the back of this is, how can employers tell if their situation is a termination for cause or a termination without cause?
Well, I'd start at a high level. Termination for cause is saying that your employee's conduct was so serious that continued employment is impossible and that you don't owe notice pay or pay in lieu of notice. So this is a high risk approach to termination. It needs serious, willful misconduct and a strong file so to support you not paying any notice. Now, terminations with cause is where you're ending employment for business or performance reasons without alleging serious misconduct. You do provide notice pay, at least the employment standards or labor standards minimums, and possibly more in common law damages. Now, we'll talk about common law in a moment. This is normally the safer and more common path that terminations take.
And what sort of proof should an employer have before calling it a for-cause termination?
My clients tell me that I say this a lot, but it depends. It depends upon the specifics of the situation. Broadly, if you have documented expectations and consequences, such as signed policies, acknowledgments that clearly set out the rules and the consequences for the violation of the policy or the recurring behavior. We need hard facts, so a fair investigation, as the case may be, to demonstrate that it is in fact willful misconduct or there were repeated issues after, say, written warnings where appropriate. Bottom line is you need a clearly demonstrated path of why the termination without paying the notice and not a lesser step was your only reasonable outcome.
It depends. That seems like something that might come up once or twice today. Everything's a little unique, but there is definitely something like that. One of the ways we can help is through our template scripts and HR advice to help keep you safe. Um, but if I have a situation where I feel like I should terminate with cause, but I don't have any of the tools that you've mentioned, what should I do?
If you think something might be for cause, and that's, I mean, almost a personal or relative reason, I have a good reason and and I shouldn't have to pay for it. But if you don't feel confident that your proof would withstand challenge, then I would advise let's pause, stabilize the situation, and then run a fair documented check. So you need to consider all aspects, review your records, confirm there's a clear policy violation, and that your response to similar has been applied consistently in the past. If your facts are gray, your next step may be to do a progressive, proper discipline plan or a fuller investigation, depending upon the reason that you've determined that employment needs to end. This does seem like a longer path, but it lowers your risk and it can reduce wrongful dismissal costs. Now, if it's still mixed, then your safer lane is going to be a termination without cause, paying the proper notice per your jurisdictions at a minimum. And then maybe if taking a more in-depth look, the evidence does become stronger, then and the response is proportionate, then okay, maybe we revisit the cause and advise on how best to proceed.
And I think this would be a good time to kind of revisit something you said a little earlier, because off the back of this, you mentioned common law earlier. Now, there's common law and employment standards. What are the differences between the two?
Let's look at it. There's two buckets to think about when you're ending employment. The first is the applicable employment or labor standards, and these are your legislated minimums. When you end employment, you owe the working notice or pay in lieu of notice that your province or territory requires. Benefits during that period, and in some jurisdictions, there's statutory severance on top. I want to make a quick side note here. Often the word severance is used to mean what is paid out in total. But for clarity, statutory severance only exists in some provinces and jurisdictions, Ontario and federally regulated employers, for example. Back to our second bucket. Let's call that the common law. This isn't legislation per se. It comes from court decisions. So an employee can seek additional notice, often weeks, months more, if there isn't a valid contract that limits you to the minimums. So here's how a sequence of events would go. You pay the statutory minimums. The employee or their lawyer makes a claim. Often these matters don't even go to trial. They're negotiated between, legal or the employer and the employee, even using recent cases to estimate what a judge would likely to award. The common law and these estimates are based on four main factors: how old the person is, how long they've been with you, how tough the job market is. Other details can matter too. Basically, it comes down to, how long is it going to take them to find another job? So think that minimums plus your case law top up that's tailored to the situation, you plan for that range, not just what the employment standards table says.
So it sounds like it can depend based on each circumstance, but there's definitely a set of rules that are in place for all of that. One of the challenges here is when you are looking to terminate an employee, what are some of the red flags I should be looking for to seek outside help?
So red flags, we're going to advise pausing anytime there's a protected reason or a leave in play, medical, parental leave, family's responsibility. This because something like that can turn what you thought was a routine exit into a human right issue. I advise caution also if there's been a recent complaint about harassment, safety, wages. Moving to terminate right after a situation like that can be perceived as reprisal. Now, if your documentation is thin, let's say you've got poor performance notes, no clear expectations, or inconsistent enforcement, then your cost or risk goes up. Senior or long-serving employees also raise exposure. Unionized roles or cross-province remote roles bring extra rules you have to follow. And if there's serious allegations, violence, theft, or messy off-duty social media, perhaps, I recommend slowing down for a proper investigation and privacy check before deciding how to move forward on a termination.
It just sounds like if you have something going on in the workplace, you could just give us a call. We'll walk you through, make you understand the situation you're dealing with, and ensure that you can handle it correctly in the type of situation that's actually in front of you. It's what we're here for. You can call, speak to Kim anytime you want. Not a problem, which is pretty nice. Now, one of the ways that you can protect yourself is with the right documentation. How can having the right employment contracts and policies protect the business from a wrongful dismissal or a common law or any claim against the business?
Well, strong contracts are everything. And your policies that also set those ground rules before anything goes wrong. So when employees have acknowledged their clear policies, it's easier to show that they knew what was expected. It was clearly identified to the employee. Uh, Huge, a valid, up-to-date termination clause in your contract that can cap what you owe as long as that the clause, again, can withstand challenge by either legislation or current case law. So this is why often we recommend that you have your employment agreements vetted professionally by legal periodically to ensure that they can withstand that challenge. Now, just as important, good policies can only help if you use them. Consistent enforcement, documented path. So we go expectations, coaching, written warning. That creates the proof that your defense is going to rely on.
So I shouldn't just go online, pull up ChatGPT, and just write and ask it to write an agreement for me.
I mean, from HR policies to marketing campaigns, growth strategies, tools like ChatGPT can return words, lots of words in seconds. However, without the full context, vetted compliance, and lived experience, those words can quickly fall short, and that puts your business at risk.
Becomes tricky for sure. And that kind of brings us on to one of the last things I want to talk about here when it comes to termination, which is termination during probation. If an employee is still in probation, what obligations does an employer have for severance, and are there risks associated with that?
This is a great question. Probation isn't a free pass. Broadly speaking, probation isn't in employment or labor standards. That's what is there is the length of employment that requires you to give working notice or pay in lieu of notice. Probation is really a construct of contract law. That's where a probationary period is set in the employment agreement, which says during this time we will assess fit or capability and competencies. And if we terminate during this time, then we will only have to pay you X. Now, even if that is in play, you're still in the probation periods over, say, 3 months in Ontario or many jurisdictions, you're still going to have to pay the notice required. Common law risk can still show up. So if your termination or probation clauses aren't enforceable, a court may still award extra beyond the minimums.
And actually, one of the questions I get all the time from people who call in and want to speak with us I just hired an employee. Aren't they already on probation once they start working?
Yeah, like I mentioned, probation isn't in the legislation. It's a valid and properly used period of time to ensure that the employment's going to work out. So depending upon where you are, you're still going to owe minimums if they're, under 3 months. There's varying different 90 days. But the other thing to keep in mind is human rights apply from day one. So a medical leave, pregnancy, parental leave, a family status situation, or complaints related to other protected grounds, those are all still in place. So whether they've been there 2 days or 2 years, we still have to respect those. The other key thing is deadlines matter. So letting someone work past your probationary date without a decision or trying to extend it informally, that can really undermine your position as well.
It's a really tricky one, and it's one that a lot of people overlook. There's honestly so much more we could talk about when it comes to termination, but we do only have so much time today. I'd just like to summarize our termination section by kind of asking what would be some of the key takeaways you'd hope people take away from what we've discussed so far?
Another thing my clients get tired of me saying, documents, a documented foundation, signed policy acknowledgements, training records, performance notes, written warnings, they build the proof that your decision will stand on. A defensible process, run a fair investigation, hear both sides, enforce consistently, use progressive discipline where it fits, and risk assessment and pause. Watch for those protected grounds or leaves or recent complaints. Slow down on those high exposure cases.
Amazing. And just as a reminder for everyone here at Citation, we've been helping businesses for well over 15 years. We can walk you through any challenges you may have with termination, from your documentation through to advisory. But now as we transition into the attendance section, I'd like everyone to know that in the chat, there should be a link available to you. If you want to have a one-on-one conversation about some of the challenges you're facing, feel free to book in some time with one of our specialists here, and I'd be happy to walk you through some of the challenges you may be facing. and see how we can help you out for a quick chat. But I think what we'll do now, while you're looking at that, is throw the next poll up in place as we transition into attendance. The question is going to be, what's the toughest attendance challenge in your workplace right now? We'll give everyone a few moments here to take a look while we complete that poll.
Do we not have the Jeopardy theme song to play?
Fortunately not. I mean, we could ask Yusuf or Alex if they could throw that in there, but. All right. I'll give it a few more seconds here. 4, 3, 2, 1. I think that should be good. All right, let's see. Oh, yeah. So there's a ton of different responses here across the board. Things from, it's honestly pretty close across the board. A lot of them is short notice sickness, which is definitely one of them. But I guess the first question I want to ask off the back of this is, what would be some of the systems and processes you recommend every business have in place to manage attendance in the workplace?
Well, I'm going to start with a clear attendance policy and process and a formal tracking system. This is one place where every absence is logged with dates, reasons, and codes, if you will. Now, the reason for the codes or the reasons is this helps you meet your legislated leave entitlements. You can also, in a tracking system, see patterns early, which supports your improvement plans with real data, or later defends your actions when attendance doesn't improve. My rule is simple: say what you're going to do and do what you said you were going to do consistently. So from there, you have two lanes. Absences fall under can't attend or that they won't attend. The tracking and the documentation keeps those lanes clear.
And so once I have a policy, it kind of just runs itself. Is that how it works?
If it's just who to call and when, you're going to miss the real issues and risks. A usable attendance policy sets clear expectations and what happens and when. So how managers will respond, when updates are due, what counts as late or no-show, and how information is handled confidentially. So pair that with a central tracking system, and every absence is logged in the same way by date, reason, across the sites and across managers. Now, that's going to help you meet your legislative entitlements. You're going to spot patterns, and you're going to keep files consistent for coaching. Clarity around making the roles explicit. What does the employee do? What does the manager do? When does HR step in? Keeping your training records to show who was trained on what. And then when those pieces work together, then your follow through, you reduce mistakes and you have the record you need if your attendance becomes a discipline issue later on.
It seems like documentation is one of the key points through all of attendance, top to bottom. But you did mention something a couple seconds ago. I kind of jumped past it a little, but you mentioned can't attend versus won't attend. What do you mean by that?
When I say can't attend, I'm sorting or versus won't, I'm sorting the absence into the right lane path. So if someone's calling in, I start with a neutral question. Is today's absence tied to health or family responsibility, or is it something else? So a can't may be a protected leave or protected grounds, health, pregnancy, family responsibility. You pause any discipline at that point and you move into, if necessary, a leave or accommodation lane. If it isn't there and it seems to be more, I won't come to work, which is perception, car broken down, dog ran away, it's Friday before a long weekend. Now we're going to look at that this is, could be a performance issue. In that woke path, then we've got to look on clarity. Were the expectations clear and acknowledged in the last policy or coaching? Is there a pattern? Back to our Fridays. Has this continued after we set those expectations? That quick sort helps us protect privacy, make sure we're using the right process, and addressing the reason behind the absence.
I will say I hear the Friday one more than I thought I would. It does come up quite often. One of the challenges that I find people have is, what are the limitations to questions I can ask when someone is taking that time off?
Yeah. Fair. There are real limits. So if a reason sounds like it could be a protected leave, health, parental, family responsibility, bereavement, then again, you're not going towards the discipline. You're acknowledging the time off request and following the lead pathway. So keep your questions neutral. Stick to what is needed to know in order to schedule and move your day forward or week forward. It's also important to keep the discussion confidential and consistent with your policy and provincial rules because some jurisdictions limit what you can ask for and when you can ask for it. So in Ontario, first 3 personal illness days, can't ask for anything. The goal is simple: get your basic planning info, use the right process, and protect privacy while you sort out the details.
I mean, it sounds somewhat straightforward, but honestly, it can get quite complicated. But so, like, at what point can I ask for proof?
This is my favorite saying ever. Employers can ask for proof that is reasonable in the circumstances and that's allowed under legislation. And again, every everybody's got different amount of time and what you can ask for and when. It's usually, after the threshold in legislation, after the threshold in your policy. For example, if it's, 1, 2 days off and, an employee attestation, maybe just fine. It's going into a few more days and they're past what you're allowed to ask for, then it should be light touch and proportionate. So a brief note confirming that they're unfit to work and what the expectation of time frame to return. We cannot ask for the diagnosis, only the prognosis. So that is to say, we can ask for what they can and they cannot do and for how long. So for non-medical issues, simple documents like a jury summons or a court notice, that would be enough. Be consistent with everyone, ask promptly, collect the minimum information just to plan your staffing, keep it confidential again. If it's unclear, then you can step up your requests. Right? Then you can look at a formal medical note if a pattern continues. If someone can't provide what you asked for, let's look at reasonable alternatives before moving to discipline.
I would just always recommend in these moments, if you're unsure, call before taking that action. Document, but call us. We'll be happy to walk you through how to do this properly. There is a fine line sometimes here on these ones, and it's a difficult thing to manage for sure. And now the goal with absenteeism usually is not to terminate, but at what point does absenteeism become a termination issue?
Absenteeism can become a termination issue only after you've managed it consistently and the problem doesn't improve. And it's a case by case. So again, making sure expectations were clear, attendance was tracked, the coaching conversations happen, the attendance plan happen. If the pattern continues, you may have to move to a written warning. Again, this is on the won't attend, not the can't. Final warnings, last chance agreements with those specific timelines and targets. Along the way, you want to screen for those protected leaves. And if those are in play, it may take a pause. The often cited idea that 3 no-shows equals job abandonment is probably the second most quoted HR myth. Job abandonment, now that needs clear policy language. It needs a real attempt to contact the employee, show that they didn't, willfully didn't respond. And then termination is the last resort when showing that expectations were not met, even though fair chances were given.
Sorry, you just said something I need to ask. You said the second most common question you get. What's the number one? I just need to know.
That would be about vacation and the use it or lose it rule.
Actually, you know what? So you know what? I won't ask about this. Ironically, that's going to be the topic of our next episode in our webinar. But that does make sense. Lose it or use it is definitely something that comes up quite a lot. Now, when it comes to absenteeism, I would say one of the questions I get quite often is, how does absenteeism hurt my bottom line?
I mean, the biggest costs don't even show up in one line. They leak everywhere. You see it in overtime, needing to bring in temps, supervisors having to rework schedules, lost onboarding of time for backfills. Now we've got quality, safety slips, more errors, rework, near misses. When you've got tired or undertrained people covering, customers certainly can feel it through missed deadlines, refunds, reputational drag. Now let's look at internally. Morale drops, turnover rises. Replacing someone often costs you around 100 to 150% of salary once you count in recruiting and training. And then there's short unmanaged absences tend to grow into longer leaves with delayed return to work and the files aren't clean. So this is where accommodation of protected leaves comes in. If you miss those obligations, the cost and the exposures jump. And on those notes, we'll dig into that in a future session. But the main focus here, track it, coach it, and document it, and that can limit avoidable exposure.
I mean, that kind of takes us right into the end of our absenteeism section here. But similar to the termination side, I'd love to to know what would you want people to take away when it comes to absenteeism, which we've just scratched the surface on.
Someone
So,
set the rules, process, policy, train your team, track every absence, follow through the same way every time as the case calls for. If those red flags pop up, protected leaves, accommodations, get advice. Now, whether it's from something like our live HR advice team here at Citation Canada or another HR professional, because getting it wrong can cost far more.
100%. I'd love to say thank you so much, Kim, for taking the time out of your day to join us. I think we are about at the end of our time here. Just so everyone knows, our next webinar is going to be on October 7th for compliance and practice, covering leaves and accommodations. So it's going to basically kick off right where we left off here today. I'm going to be there with Kim again, and we hope we can all have you there with us. If you'd like to have a one-on-one chat, just click on the link in the chat that is there right now and book some time in with me, and I'd be happy to talk to you one-on-one. We really do thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found something helpful for your business. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again on the next one.